The Satanic Panic Files, what really happened in the 80s. Ritual murder has been charged against daycare personnel. Teenagers are accused of worshiping the devil. Suburban mothers are whispering about cults in the forests. During the 1980s, America had a mental breakdown. A new apprehension was circulating in classrooms, police departments, talk shows, and courtrooms, but not of serial murderers or drugs, but of something more sinister, something imperceptible. Satan. The Satanic Panic was not merely a cultural occurrence, all in the name of safeguarding children from a threat that never existed. It was a wildfire of hysteria that ruined lives, imprisoned innocence, and distorted the justice system. However, it was not a prank. It was not exaggerated. Additionally, it was not innocuous, because real victims were concealed beneath the headlines and hyperbole, and they were not the ones you might anticipate. This is the true chilling account of what truly transpired during the Satanic Panic, a period in which dread was disguised as morality and nearly consumed an entire nation. Introduction. The fire begins with a whisper. It did not commence with a homicide. Conversely, a custom, or even Satan himself. It commenced with a questionable accusation, as so many panics do. A parent in Manhattan Beach, California claimed in 1983 that her son had been abused at a local preschool, McMartin Preschool, which was one of the most prominent daycares in the area. What began as a solitary, horrifying allegation rapidly evolved into something far stranger. Police issued letters to more than 200 families, encouraging them to inquire about their children's experiences. Suddenly, the narratives began to flood in. However, they were not merely narratives of maltreatment. They consisted of tunnels beneath the school, witches flying, blood drinking, and children being transported to cemeteries for sacrifices. The police did not challenge the impossibility of these accounts. They accepted them. The media also followed suit. The same was true for the prosecutors, and the United States observed, both captivated and horrified. The case would become the most expensive and lengthy criminal trial in the annals of the United States by the time it concluded. However, the McMartin case was only the beginning. The perfect storm, the transformation of fear into reality. The Satanic Panic was not a coincidence. It was a perfect cultural storm. America was undergoing rapid transformation during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Traditional families were facing pressure, crime rates were elevated, and divorce rates were on the rise. The sexual revolution had concluded. People needed an object to assign responsibility to, something straightforward, something malevolent. At the same time, Christian fundamentalism was expanding rapidly, with televangelists and moral watchdogs warning of spiritual warfare and Satan's influence in popular culture. The stories of hidden symbols, secret rituals, and demonic manipulation in books such as The Satan Seller, Michelle Remembers, and Turmoil in the Toy Box are used to instill dread. Then Dungeons & Dragons, the tabletop fantasy game, was abruptly attributed to sorcery addiction and adolescent suicide. The following genre was music, heavy metal, which was blamed by religious leaders and concerned parents due to its occult imagery and aggressive sound. Bands such as Judas Priest and Ozzy Osbourne were sued in court for allegedly placing subliminal, suicidal messages in their tunes. Toys such as He-Man, Smurfs, and Care Bears were accused of embodying diabolical themes. The outcome was a national moral panic, in which every shadow had horns and every misfortune was the devil's work. Courtrooms devolved into chaos. Daycare workers, instructors, and parents were subjected to unimaginable accusations as fear spread. In Bakersfield, California, dozens of children testified that they had been sexually abused by multiple adults in satanic ceremonies. There was no tangible evidence, absence of photographs, absence of DNA. Simply testimonies, which are obtained through repeated interviews, are frequently supplemented by leading questions, coaching, and occasionally even false memories that are implanted by suggestion. The Little Rascals daycare case in North Carolina accused 7 adults of crimes so horrific, dozens of children were abused over years, that it is nearly impossible to describe. However, once more, there was no tangible evidence, narratives alone. Fran and Dan Keller, daycare owners in Austin, Texas, were accused of ritualistic abuse that included bloodletting, infant sacrifices, and being flown to Mexico for ceremonies, all within the course of a single afternoon. They were found guilty and sentenced to 21 years in prison before it was discovered that they were innocent. However, the most notorious case was McMartin Preschool, in which Peggy McMartin and her family were tried for satanic abuse over 7 years. The McMartins were acquitted after the trial. However, their existence was irreparably obliterated. Their enterprise has been discontinued. Their reputations were eternally tarnished. The media fueled the fires. Talk programs evolved into theaters of the absurd. Geraldo Rivera informed millions of viewers in his 1988 special Exposing Satan's Underground that there were more than 1 million Satanists in America who were covertly abusing children and holding rituals. He asserted that Satan worshippers had infiltrated the government, churches, and institutions. Absence of substantiation, without any citations. It is merely sensationalism. As part of a satanic cult, one woman claimed to have witnessed the sacrifice of 25,000 babies. However, she was unable to provide any information regarding the locations, corpses, or witnesses. She was not questioned by the United States. The United States of America responded with enthusiasm. In residences throughout the nation, individuals secured their doors, examined their children's objects for concealed pentagrams, and turned on one another. Fear had prevailed. The truth was rendered irrelevant. The therapists who planted demons. Therapists assisted patients in uncovering neglected traumas through this contentious approach. However, in numerous instances, these memories were not retrieved. Rather, they were generated. Patients were frequently informed that their melancholy, anxiety, or eating disorders were symptoms of repressed abuse. People began to recall elaborate rituals, baby sacrifices, and satanic ceremonies under hypnosis or suggestion, occasionally involving their parents or instructors. These memories, which were previously believed, were transformed into legal ammunition. Innocent individuals were prosecuted. Families were severed. However, the majority of these assertions have been completely refuted decades later. Michelle's narrative, fabricated. Who are the therapists? Untrained in the field of memory science. However, by that time, thousands of lives had already been lost. The victims who are not discussed. More than just tarnished reputations were the consequences of the Satanic Panic. More than 100 individuals were unjustly convicted. Some were incarcerated for decades for offenses that never occurred. Accusations continued to tarnish the identities of others until their deaths. Victims included children. They were subjected to hours of aggressive interviews, coerced into expressing opinions they did not comprehend, and left with distorted memories of events that never transpired. Entire communities were dismembered, and yet no physical evidence of a satanic ritual abuse network in the United States has ever been discovered. Not a single body. There is not a singular ritual site, not a solitary piece of corroborated evidence. The devil did not appear. However, terror prevailed, and it inflicted wounds that were infinitely more profound than those of any cult. Conclusion: when panic becomes a weapon. The Satanic Panic was not about Satan. The devil emerged as the ideal antagonist in a nation that was grappling with cultural transformation, criminal activity, and moral ambiguity. He was both everywhere and nowhere. Additionally, any individual, including your teacher, neighbor, or babysitter, could serve as his surrogate. A mere murmur sufficed. In the present day, the panic is frequently regarded as a joke, a frivolous, antiquated episode of hysteria from the 1980s. However, it was no amusing matter for those who were imprisoned, humiliated, and demolished. It was a mass delusion, one of the most significant miscarriages of justice in the annals of modern American history. We will always be susceptible to the next hysteria as long as we allow fear to override facts and continue to believe that evil only assumes the form we anticipate. Satan may not be the culprit the next time. However, the cocktail will have an equally poisonous flavor. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe for more real horror tales, and let us know in the comments.